to go?
Yep.
All right, let's pray. Thank you for the words that you've given me in preparation in this, and Lord, I just pray that you would help it to come out the way that you intend it to, that it would be your words and not mine. And Lord, just that we would get to learn something about you and who you are and your character, just how powerful you are. Love you and thank you. Pray that you be with me in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so I have had the privilege to be able to have rafted a lot of the great rivers in this country, whitewater rafting. I got to raft the Snake River in Idaho, the Rio Grande down by New Mexico. On this side of the country, I've gotten to do the Nantahala, the Ocoee, and then my personal favorite, the Chattahoochee, that runs right through my backyard back home in Columbus, Georgia. And I've had on all of those, with the exception of the Ocoee, I have had near-death experiences. I have really bad luck when it comes to whitewater rafting. In fact, I haven't done it in about 2 years because of the situation that I'm about to tell you about. So the last river that I rafted was the Chattahoochee. I hadn't rafted it because they just recently built the whitewater park, like about 6 or 7 years ago. And so when I was getting ready to move up here to Toccoa, and one of my coworkers from this student ministry that I used to work at, named Caleb, he was getting ready to move to Kosovo the same summer. And so we had these students that we used to take on these adventures all the time, this group of like 4 guys that we would take backpacking and camping and do these long trips with. And they said, hey, Caleb and Andrew, since you guys are about to leave, we want to do one last big thing. So me and Caleb thought, what would be a cool thing to send us out on. And we decided, let's raft the Chattahoochee, but let's do it in duckies. You don't know what duckies are. Usually when you see a raft going down a river, it's those big, like 10 to 12 man rafts, right? Well, duckies are 2-man rafts. They're just big enough for 2 people to fit in, flat bottom, they're really narrow, kind of shaped like a kayak, but without the agility that a kayak has. So they're really hard to control. So we decided this is what we want to do. So we went down there and we got to the outfitter. We know the guy that runs the outfitting company. And he said, hey guys, the water is really high today, like unusually high. I usually would never let anybody go down in duckies. But since I know you guys, I'm going to let you take the duckies down. But you have to promise me not to goof off. Like this isn't going to be one of those rafting trips where you play around, you splash each other. This is going to be serious, and you guys need to be taking it seriously. So we said, okay. So we drove up, we got in. If you know anything about rafting, you know that the rapids are classified 1 through 6. Right? You have class 1 through class 6 rapids, and class 6 is actually illegal to raft in unless you're a professional. Class 5 is the biggest that you can go commercially, which is what we were doing. And Class 5 rapid is actually classified as rescue conditions difficult, significant hazard to life. So this river was composed at high water of mostly 3s, 4s, and then 1 Class 5 at the end. And so we started going, we got in the very first rapid, me and Caleb got in, and as a class 3, we're thinking no problem. Well, the first one dumps us, right? And we have to scramble back in and get back in the ducky, and I realized this is going to be rough. Like this is going to be a lot harder than we thought it was going to be. We didn't just show up to have a fun time here. So we started going, and we actually got pretty good at it. We got good at controlling it. We were going through some of the class 4s and doing what I felt like was pretty good. So we go through the whole, almost 2 miles of this river, and we get to the end, and you have a decision to make at the end. You can either go on this side, the Georgia side of the river, and you go down a rapid class 4 called the Wave Shaper, and that one's pretty intense. Or you can go on the right side, the Alabama side of the river, and that's called Cutbank, and that is the largest class 5 rapid on the East Coast. And so before we left, the one thing that the outfitter that we knew told us is, whatever you do, absolutely do not go down Cutbank in these duckies. And we're like, Yes, we don't want anything to do with that. The problem is, we're on the right side of the river. So to get to Wave Shaper, we have to cross the whole Chattahoochee to get to Wave Shaper, right? To get to the Class 4 and come through safely. So we had a guide with us that the outfitter had sent us as a part of our conditions, and the guide started to cut across the water. He's in a kayak, right? Kayaks have triangular bottoms, so he just cuts right across and says, "Follow me, this is where you need to go." And we say, "Okay." Me and Caleb start going, and the river just takes us. And I realized almost immediately, we're not going to make it. Like there's no way we make it to Wave Shaper. And so we're just paddling as hard as we can. Like I almost had a heart attack, just as hard as I can. And I'm sitting in the back, and so I'm the one that has to steer. And I eventually stop paddling, and Caleb says, why aren't you paddling? And I just take a few deep breaths, really trying to calm down, because I can feel like panic starting to set in. And I said, "Caleb, we're not going to make it, all right? I'm going to swing us around so that we at least head into this thing head first, right? I don't want to go in sideways." The problem with cut bait is it starts off with about a 7-foot drop into the rapid, which is a big deal when you're in a 10-man raft. It's an impossible deal when you're in a ducky. So we approach this thing, and I'm just staring into this rapid. And we go in. Before we even hit the bottom of that thing, I'm sideways and out. And I took as big of a breath as I could, but when I went underwater, I just started tumbling and tumbling and tumbling and tumbling. And there was a long period of time where I couldn't tell if I was being pulled down the river or if I was caught in a turbine, and if I was just going to be stuck there until I was out of oxygen. And so I'm tumbling and I'm rolling around, and just when I start to think, like, this is really bad, like I might not make it out of this, the water calms down, and cut bait spits me out the other side. And I get up and I take a breath and I look around and I see Caleb, and he's good and he's giving me the thumbs up, and we do that like laugh that men do when you just cheat death, like we shouldn't have made it through but we did. And I'm excited, and then I remember I've got 2 boats of students behind me, and they got sucked in too, and so I have to watch them go through everything I went through, knowing they're probably going to be okay, but it was tough to watch, right? And it was just awful, like that feeling of being stuck and not knowing where you're going. And I watched one of the kids, John, gets out, and he gets spit out the other end, and he climbs up on the rocks and just throws up immediately all over the shore. And afterwards we were talking, and we were just like, man, that was terrifying. Like there was a minute where I really didn't know if I was going to live. If I had to use 2 words to describe the Chattahoochee and that experience, I would say terrifying, uncontrollable. Terrifying and uncontrollable. Like the water is anything to beat it. It's so strong. Like water is so powerful when it's moving at that rate. We know that by looking at the falls, right? There's nothing you can do to stop that amount of water moving. It's terrifying and it's uncontrollable. And I see these similar descriptions of the Lord throughout Scripture. And I think it's commonly called the fear of the Lord, right? The experience that you have when you come face to face with Him. I think it's something that's been like pretty vastly miscommunicated to us. At least I know I have growing up, was always told when you read a passage on the fear of the Lord, they would stop and say, that doesn't actually mean to be afraid. It means to have a respect or a reverence, right? But that's not what I see when I see people from Genesis to Revelation encountering God, when they see Him face to face. And so today, if we will turn to Mark 10 with me, Mark chapter 10, I want to look at the story of a man named Bartimaeus, a man who met Jesus face to face. He's a blind beggar, and I just want us to look at his reaction and look at his interaction with Jesus Christ, God Himself come down in the flesh. So Mark chapter 10, starting in verse 46, story of Bartimaeus. It says, "When they came to Jericho, and as he was leaving Jericho with his disciples and a great crowd, Bartimaeus, a blind beggar, the son of Timaeus, was sitting on the roadside. And when he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out and say, 'Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me.' And many rebuked him, telling him to be silent. But But he cried out all the more, Son of David, have mercy on me. I want to pause there. Son of David, have mercy on me. I think when I was reading this passage a couple of months ago, that stood out to me. Have mercy on me. This is a strange thing to say. I've only said something along those lines, I think, twice in my life. Once was standing before a judge, trying to get them to lower an astronomical speeding ticket, right? Have mercy on me. The second was before my mom, after I had broken my little brother's arm for the second time. So, have mercy on me is something that you only say when it implies fear, right? The person at the other end of that conversation has some sort of power that you're a little bit afraid of. Have mercy on me. And again, I think we've been taught that this is kind of, the fear of the Lord is like a respect or a reverence. And I want to get into that a little bit. Is this like a fear or a respect? And when I look at the encounters that people had from Genesis to Revelation, I look at Adam and Eve, right? After they had eaten the forbidden fruit, what's the first thing they do? They go and they hide. And when God finally finds them in the garden, Adam says, I hid because I was afraid. Have mercy on me, right? I can imagine that was going through his mind. One of my favorite descriptions of Jesus in all of Scripture comes in Revelation chapter 19. And you see it in between all of them, starting in Genesis all the way to Revelation, and everybody in between, Isaiah and Moses, and all these guys that encountered God, they're terrified when they stand before him. And then we get to Revelation, the second coming of Christ, 19 verse 11, and it says, Then I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse. The one sitting on it is called Faithful and True. And on it, and in righteousness, he judges and makes war. His eyes are like a flame of fire, and on his head are many crowns. And he has a name written that no one knows but himself. He is clothed in a robe dipped in blood, and by the name which he is called is the Word of God. And the armies of heaven, arrayed in fine linen, white and pure, were following him on white horses. From his mouth comes a sharp sword with which to strike down the nations, and he will rule them with a rod of iron. He will tread on the winepress of the fury, the wrath of God the Almighty. Robes dipped in blood, a sword coming out of his mouth. This is terrifying. It's a terrifying image. And I think the answer here is that it's both. Like, we have this gentle, peaceful, and graceful Jesus that says, let the children come to me. But we also get this Jesus whose robes are dipped in blood and has the armies of heaven at his back, eyes that look like fire, and a sword coming out of his mouth. I had the fear of the Lord described to me one time. I grew up in the South, so we use guns as an analogy a lot. And it was described to me as gun safety, right? And of course, guns are powerful, and they can be scary, but you have nothing to be afraid of if you're using it properly, right? That's how the fear of the Lord was described to me. That's an analogy that I've stuck with for a long time, but there's two issues with that. First of all is, of course, it's not scary until it's pointed back at you. And then the second is that it assumes that you can control this God, that you can control him. And you absolutely cannot. He is terrifying, and he is uncontrollable. And we hate losing control, especially in Western culture. We hate losing control. Like, why are we scared to get on roller coasters for the first time? Or the demented among us, why do we love getting on roller coasters? Because when that lap bar latches down, you're out of control. There's nothing you can do. That guy up there is going to hit the button, and you're going to be gone. And for however long the roller coaster takes, you're out of control. Or a more like day-to-day example, something that I really despise is going through the car wash. You know, when you pull up and you have to park on that little track and put your car in neutral and take your hands off the wheel. It's like the worst feeling, because you're like, I am supposed to be in control of this. Like everything they taught me about driving, I am not supposed to lose control. We hate losing control. But what are these things other than a device for control? Right? We have like social media to control the way that people see our lives. We have the phone to call 911 or towing services or something if something goes wrong. And I'm old enough, just old enough, I think, to remember a time where phones really weren't that reliable. And if you got a flat tire on the side of the road, you were out of control. You had to figure it out yourself. But think about the big issues in our country right now, like the big political issues, the wall. Like, what is that other than a device for control? It's control or abortion. Like the whole argument around that issue is the issue of control. Who has control over these lives? A really big one, gun control, right? Control is such a big issue for us because we hate losing control. We want this like water bottle kind of God, right? That we can control. We're comfortable with this. I can take this out. I can take the cap off. I can take a sip when I'm thirsty or when I want to spend time with them. But when I'm done with it, when it's uncomfortable, when it's hard, I can put it away and not think about it, at least for a little bit. But that's not what we got, right? We got the Chattahoochee River of a God who's terrifying and uncontrollable. We cannot control this God, and a lot of people have tried, like Adam and Eve at the beginning, like taking a bite of that fruit was an attempt to gain control, or the Tower of Babel, right? Trying to build a tower to get up on God's level, and he shot that down real quick. He cannot be controlled. I think of Pharaoh, right? Trying to control God's people, and then through them control God. And God says, no, you're not going to control me. I'll send plagues, and you're going to let my people go. I think of Jesus when he walked the earth dealing with the Pharisees. Right? They were constantly trying to get him trapped and control him in these like word games, and he put them to shame every time. This God cannot be controlled. He's terrifying and he's uncontrollable. And I know that at this point in the sermon, it's kind of like, all right, where are you going with this? This isn't good news so far, but I want to tell you that this is undoubtedly good news, that we serve a terrifying and uncontrollable God. It's the best news. Simply for the fact, one, that he can't be controlled. Right? He wouldn't be controlled by Adam and Eve in the garden. He wouldn't be controlled by the Israelites when they were wandering through the desert and trying to build these false gods. He wouldn't be controlled by Satan when Jesus wandered in the wilderness for those 40 days. And he would not be controlled even by the grave. Not even death can control this God. And this is good news because we're on his team. Right? He fights for us. Again, with the gun analogy, like it's good news as long as it's not pointing at us, right? He fights on our side. He fights on our behalf. When it comes time to fight that war on sin and death, don't you want to be on the side of the one riding on the white horse with a sword coming out of his mouth, fire, eyes, and robes dipped in blood? Like, I don't want to be on the opposite end of that for sure. We're on his side and he fights for us. I think the most incredible part about serving this terrifying and uncontrollable God is that he never abuses his power. He never abuses his power. He is not a dictator. And we see that when we return to Mark chapter 10. You guys forgot we were even in there. I didn't. Mark chapter 10, picking back up, let's go back to verse 47. We're talking about Bartimaeus, remember. And when he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out and say, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. And many rebuked him, telling him to be silent, but he cried out all the more, Son of David, have mercy on me. And Jesus stopped. Jesus stopped and said, call him. And they called the blind man, saying to him, take heart, get up, he is calling you. And throwing off his cloak, he sprang up and came to Jesus. And Jesus said to him, what do you want me to do for you? What do you want me to do for you? And the blind man said to him, Rabbi, let me recover my sight. And Jesus said to him, go your way, your faith has made you well. And immediately he recovered his sight and followed him on the way. Now, I don't know what Bartimaeus was expecting, when he cried out, "Son of David, have mercy on me." I don't know if he was calling out of fear because he knows this guy is who he says he is, and you guys have no idea. This is the Son of God. Have mercy on me. Or if he was calling out of fear from a place of knowing exactly who he was. I'm just Bartimaeus, the blind beggar. I'm not worthy to be standing in front of this Son of David. I don't know what he was expecting when he called out, but I know that what he got was a terrifying and uncontrollable God who stopped. Stopped. I love that those 3 words, and Jesus stopped. He's going on his way to Jerusalem, right, for the triumphal entry. He's on his way to something that's a pretty big deal. And he stops, and he opens Bartimaeus' eyes, and the first thing that Bartimaeus sees, and who knows how long, are the eyes of Jesus. And I imagine that that's an equally terrifying and peaceful experience, because we get both sides of this God who's terrifying and uncontrollable, who's also gracious and merciful, and who sits down and spends time with this blind beggar on the side of the road. And I love the question that Jesus asked Bartimaeus. What do you want me to do for you? It's a ridiculous question for a terrifying and uncontrollable God to be asking a blind man on the side of the road. Hey, what can I do for you today? It's a ridiculous question, but not when you understand the character of who this God really is. And Bartimaeus' response is so beautiful. Just restore my sight, Rabbi. Acknowledges who he is. I think what makes this especially powerful is that this is actually the second time that Jesus has asked this question in this chapter. If you rewind it to verse 35, and we catch up with the disciples before they even meet Bartimaeus, it says, "And James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came up to him and said to him, 'Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you.'" Right, there's that control. "We want you to do for us whatever we ask of you." And he said to them, "What do you want me to do for you?" And they said to him, "Grant us to sit, one at your right hand and one at your left, in your glory." And Jesus said to them, "You do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink, or be baptized with the baptism which I am baptized?" And they said to him, "We are able." And Jesus said to them, "The cup that I drink you will drink, and with the baptism with which I am baptized you will be baptized. But to sit at my right hand or my left is not mine to grant, but it is for those whom it has been prepared." And when the 10 heard it, they began to be indignant at James and John. And Jesus called to them and said, "You know that those who are considered rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. But it shall not be so among you. But whoever would be great among you must be your servant. And whoever would be first among you must be a slave to all. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." Even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. And this, to me, is what makes it so beautiful. Look at the contrast between the conversation between Jesus and Bartimaeus and Jesus and James and John. Right? They come at him with this controlling spirit, and he asks them the question, "Are you able to drink the cup with which I am going to drink?" The cup that he's talking about is a cup that Jesus refers to a few times throughout the Gospels, and it's the cup of his death, the sacrifice going to the cross. Right? He says, you don't even know what you're asking. When I ask you the question, "What do you want me to do for you?" and then your response is, lift us up, put us in a higher position. You don't know what you're asking. You don't know that in order to get where I'm going to go, you have to follow in my footsteps, right? That I'm going to walk that walk, that I am going to drink that cup and be beaten and bruised and spit on and shamed and nailed to a cross, legs broken and suffocate and die. Are you able to drink that cup? And he says, "I am willing to give his life as a ransom for many." He is willing to walk that walk and to drink that cup because this terrifying and uncontrollable God he loves with a terrifying and uncontrollable love. He loves with a terrifying and uncontrollable love. I don't know, has anybody seen the movie Taken? Taken. If you haven't seen it, it's a story about a young girl who goes to vacation in Europe, right? She gets abducted and sold into sex slavery. And the thing about it is that her dad happens to be this retired James Bond-esque kind of character. So the whole movie is about him getting to her, and he kills just about half of Europe to do it. And the movie ends on this boat, the scene on this boat where he comes in to rescue her, and the guards that are on this boat are just shaking in their boots because they've heard the stories of how this guy's been traveling all over to get to that boat, to get his daughter, because he loves her with a terrifying and uncontrollable love. And he is not going to be stopped at anything to get a hold of his children. And that, I think, is the same love with which God loves us, with which Jesus loved Bartimaeus. He will stop at nothing, even if it means walking that walk to ensure that he dies so that we don't have to experience that kind of death. What do you want me to do for you? He says, and in John, greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. And I don't know about you guys, but I don't have many friends like that. I've got one in Jesus and one who lived it out, who gave his life for that greater love, that terrifying and uncontrollable greater love. I think at this point, the question is, like, now we have this better understanding of the fear of the Lord, but what does that even mean? Right? Like, that was the question that I had preparing for this message. Like, okay, but what do we do with this? Well, what does that mean in my day-to-day? And I think that we follow Bartimaeus' example, right? That we approach Jesus with this fear to say, have mercy on me, because it's that fear of the Lord. The Psalms and the Proverbs say the fear of the Lord is the beginning of all wisdom. And I think in Bartimaeus we see that it leads to a deep faith. The fear of the Lord leads to a deep faith, the kind of faith that Jesus says made him well, right? So I think we follow the example of Bartimaeus, and we ask in this present time for forgiveness for going after this water bottle kind of God, right? For putting him in a box or attempting to. But he's not going to be controlled. And we don't have the option of the water bottle God. We like to think that we do. But really, the only options are not at all for the Chattahoochee River of a God that's going to turn you and toss you and make you throw up on the rocks, because he loves you that intensely. And he wants you to get caught up in his river. I love the passage in Ezekiel where God leads Ezekiel into the river, and he takes a step into the water, and he takes him a little bit further, and he says, keep coming, until eventually Ezekiel is in over his head, and he's swimming in the river, and he says, where the river flows, so everything shall live. It's in his terrifying, uncontrollable power that we find life. So I think the appropriate response is to pray for them. So if you guys would pray with me. Father, I thank you for the truth of who you are. I thank you that you are this terrifying and uncontrollable God, and that you're also merciful and loving and patient and gracious. Lord, I thank you for all of these attributes, that you're not any less than any of that. And I pray today that you would give us an appropriate fear of you, that you would guide us in your relationship that gives us that fear of you, so that we can have faith like that, so that we can learn to trust you like that. Lord, that we can learn to trust you like Bartimaeus, who just didn't even see you coming, heard you coming down the road, and cried out, Son of David, have mercy on me. I want that kind of knowledge of who you are, that I walk in reverence of you every day. And I pray that for each of us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Good job, Andrew.
Thank you.
Comments, feedback from Andrew.
That was so good. That was really, really good. I love the story at the beginning. It was really good. Really scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how you made it. I would have like been dying. I really like the fact that you kind of at the beginning, I was like, whoa, we were talking about like terrifying and uncontrollable. I was like, you know, just kind of reminded me how there's like people that believe there's like two different gods, and like the God from the Old Testament and the God from the New Testament. But I like how you kind of put it together, and like, yeah, terrifying and uncontrollable, but love. It was like it was just very perfectly well put together. That was really good.
Thank you.
I was like, the first part I was like, but then when you kind of started talking about the love and all that, I was just like, wow, this is perfect. Like,
Good.
this is the right amount.
Thank you.
Really good job.
Thank you.
Very well done.
Thank you.
Very well done. Good illustrations, kept our attention the entire time. Three relatively minor things. So, in the main theme, maybe in the beginning, just teasing out a little bit more of that fear of the Lord.
Sure.
I like where you went with it. I like how you contrast it with, we always say it's all respect, but it's more than that.
Right.
Maybe use that as a jumping off point to say, so what does it mean for us to fear the Lord?
Right.
Or somehow draw that, just to give it more outline to it.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
Mhm.
Gospel focus is Christ's death, and that is very much in line with the passage, and so that's good. Challenge them to be believing. Okay. I'm wondering if also Christ as our King though also doesn't tie into this.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, he's about to have the triumphal entry into Jerusalem as the king.
Right.
And you've got the request of James and John, which is very king-oriented,
Mhm.
and then you've got the son of David, which is obviously
Yeah.
king-oriented.
Very king-oriented.
So you have a lot of king material here
Right.
that I think ties in really nicely with the terrifying and uncontrollable.
Mhm.
But that being said, you tying the terrifying and uncontrollable into the death of Christ
Mhm.
is also a really strong point. So go deeper with it
Right.
and help people understand what is it that you want them to believe,
Mhm.
right? So the trust becomes, we see a God that is so terrifying and uncontrollable that he's going to take on humanity and die in our place.
Mhm.
And can we trust a God that is that way? Well, yeah, we can, because of the,
Right.
now you have the offset, the love and the peace, with the terrifying and
Mhm.
control. So I'm not sure what I'm saying to you there.
No, I
I think there's options there for you, but if you stick with the death of Christ, kind of help us understand what it is that we need to be trusting in.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Uh-huh.
And that ties into the application then as well. What do you want the people to walk away with?
Right.
You know? So maybe challenge them to think in terms of, later on this week, you're going to be in the midst of the rapids at some point.
Mhm.
God is there.
Yeah.
In the midst of that terrifying, uncontrollable situation, God is there. And he's not overwhelmed by it.
Mhm.
Something like that just helps to kind of go, okay, so this week I'm going to be looking for the terrifying and uncontrollable God.
Yeah.
And be okay with being afraid of him.
Yeah.
This is, your illustrations were perfect, so I'm not suggesting that this has to be added as an illustration, but there's an incredible quote from Chronicles of Narnia, the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, when Mr. Beaver is describing Aslan
Yeah.
before they've met him, and he says he's a lion, and I think it's Lucy,
Yeah.
says, "Is he safe?" And Beaver says, "Oh no, dear, he's not safe at all, but he is good."
Yeah.
And I think that captures really well that idea of, yeah, no, he's not safe, but he's good. And the goodness is what we rely on in the midst of the terror and the uncontrollable.
Right.
So, well done. Really well done. There you go. Hey, I think it did